All right, welcome to the January Subcommittee for Engineering and Infrastructure of the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Note that this meeting may involve the remote participation by members, either by telephone or other electronic means, due to the local health emergency, novel coronavirus pandemic, pursuant to the provisions of MnSTAT section 13D.021. Subcommittee, we don't have to take the roll, but I would indulge the attendees to make one agenda switch that we would, instead of starting with Cedar Isles, we would start with Graco Park, because Carrie has another conflict later, and with no opposition, I think we'll just dive right in. Carrie, if you're ready to begin. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one thing though. Barb is feeling under the weather, is not here today. Is there anyone who feels up to taking any minutes? And I hear none.
Let's let the awkward pause go a little longer.
Yeah.
It's typically good for a member to do that.
Or even if we could split it up by 3, if we have more than one member who doesn't, wants to just do part of it. I know that taking minutes slows down participation by the person taking minutes, but we're in a little bit of a bind here now. Does anyone feel like they could take the minutes for the Graco conversations that's coming up? Well, Matthew, will you pull us out of this bind?
Looking through the list, see if I can shame anyone. 1 second. Yeah, I'll do it. All right, I'll do it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Christopher, just real quick clarification on the agenda. So it'll be Graco Park first. We'll still do Hennepin second, and then Cedar Isles will be last.
Okay, that sounds good to me. So, Carrie, can you take it away?
Hi everyone, Carrie Christensen here with the Park Board. Can you hear me and see me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
But not, I can't see you. I can see you. Oh, now I can. Okay. Yep.
All right. Nice to see you all, or some of you. I'm here today to present the next round of design concept for Graco Park. I'm going to share my screen here. I think the last time I was here, we had a few concepts several months ago, and 1 sec. Is that coming through okay? It should be a website.
Looks good. Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so I can see very few of you. So if there, I'll just run through this. I'll take 10 or so minutes to run through the concept and then open it up for Q&A. And just due to the screen that I'm on, if there's chat, I won't be able to monitor the chat as I go. So I'll just circle back around and answer questions and comments at the end, if that's all right. And thank you for having me, and thank you for your ongoing attention to our parks and to walkability and access for everyone. So really glad to be here today. So here we've got this current round of engagement happening for Graco Park. And as you may recall, it's been a long time coming, almost a decade with mass acquisition, and then the build out of Halls Island here, and now the new stage of development, which is building out, designing and building out Graco Park, which is this large swath of land just upstream of Plymouth. So this is the Plymouth Avenue Bridge going from northeast to north, Minneapolis. And that's Boom Island in the distance. So just to orient you. And I like to think of, this is a regional park. It's also part of a chain or a sequence of river experience along the east bank. So Boom is downstream there, and then Sheridan Memorial up just upstream. And as I think we talked about in the last time that I met with the PAC was that we were able to secure an easement for the East Bank Trail as part of our negotiations with Graco over the last few years. And so that's the great news. And I think that's one of the most kind of central features to the park that has been both an interim use of that park. So you can see this temporary path has moved through that space. And now with the preferred concept, you'll also see it's a really significant part of the park design. So there's a survey open now and a little bit more information about the preferred concept. It's open, actually closes tomorrow. So I'm here just in the nick of time. And you can always email me additional comments if you need a little bit more time. We will be closing the online survey, but absolutely, I'll make sure to put my email in the chat before I leave, and you can email me comments. There's a summary of the previous stages of engagement. So while we've got a master plan in place that was done several years ago for this park, River First framework, which was several years ago. We've updated the design process through the last several years, and then really sped things up over the last 9 months with this particular stage of the design process. So there's been lots of iterations with Graco, and we're really excited to be hopefully planning to break ground in 2022. So the plan is still to try to go out for bid this spring, maybe early summer, and break ground by the end of the year. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the community engagement results, just because I know you have a packed agenda tonight. But if you're curious about sort of what we've heard and who we've heard from, there is some information on this website, which again, I'll make sure to drop the link for you. And so we did have, I think back last time we saw you, there was several concepts, so 3 concepts, if this rings a bell. One was more densely 3 buildings and some volleyball courts and a dog park. The next concept was more of a market kind of plaza coming off of 9th with a dock-like structure going out over the water. I should mention that in concept 1, there was a bridge going to Halls Island. And then concept 3 was more of a habitat-centered concept with the buildings sort of edged back, and a less sort of significant but sort of promenade type space going out to an overlook of Halls. In each of the concepts, if you recall, there was an underpass, which is what we're calling this tunnel concept, going under Plymouth, and then also intersection improvements. Each of the concepts has that East Bank Trail connecting from Sheridan down both to the intersection and hopefully under the bridge. So it's not an and or, it's a both. And so we heard a lot of feedback on those 3 concepts and have landed with, as is typical, sort of an amalgamation of all 3, but really taking a strong look at what's the habitat potential. It is a very urban space, right? It's right next to industrial land use. It's got large residential population nearby. So it is what we consider a fragmented urban habitat, but there still is a lot of habitat potential here. And in fact, that is one of the reasons that Halls Island was able to be reestablished in partnership with the DNR, was that it provided a really important habitat function for the river, for migratory flyway species, for reptiles, aquatic species. There's even some state funding coming to reestablish the mussel population in the channel there, which is really exciting to be able to have water quality that can support native mussels. So there is some information about the plant communities and some of the ideas around fostering habitat on this site. And one of the things with this preferred concept is that we've moved away from a bridge to Halls Island, so that to really protect it as this critical element of habitat, that's really part of the site. So people can visually interact with it. Folks could, could take like watercraft out there, so you could kayak or canoe out there, but really limiting human interaction with the island is one of the biggest, I think, moves in terms of habitat benefit for the site. And then I'll dig down into the preferred concept here to show you some other ways that habitat really shows up, but all these other functions too. So here's the preferred concept. I think what I want to do though is I'm going to just flash this before you, and then there's actually a fly-through animation of the site. So I think I'm going to start there just to give you a really quick look at the site, and should help. And then we can come back and look at it in a little more detail in the plan view. Let me see if this... Is that working okay? It's probably a little grainy. Hopefully folks can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, thank you. So this is coming in from Sibley and 8th. There is a park building proposed on the site. I'll go more into what it's proposed as. There's what the functions and sort of what the program will be in there. This is a large promenade that might be home to food trucks or a farmer's market. Will also be space where likely bikes and pedestrians would enter into the park. So there will be some mixing of modes here. And then bringing down to the river, there's looking out at Halls Island. Some kind of wild features, rocks and logs and things to play on. Different types of seating elements. And here we'd have likely bikes on one path and pedestrians on another, or other users of the park on another. A few gathering spaces proposed by the river. The vegetation is kind of abstracted here, but definitely a strong emphasis on native plantings. And this is an overlook, we're calling it. So there'd be some interpretive elements here on talking about the history of the site. Native acknowledgement, the traditional and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. There's also some other cultural uses of the island, for example, that are interesting. Like it was a bath, like a public bath at one point, before it was filled in for the Scherer Brothers lumberyard, which was another previous use of the site. So interpreting that history. And I think too, with that, there's been some interesting conversations around like industry and public space, both being important parts of our riverfront, and how do we kind of coexist. That's like interpretive elements. Okay, so now we're flying around. This is Boom Island. The hope would be to improve the bridge over the boat launch there, maybe the next stage of this project. And then this is that underpass, what we're calling it. So 30-foot wide, 12-foot high, well lit, potentially some public art in there. We are coordinating with city staff on that and starting more detailed design processes. Coming up through the park, this is an open green space. When we get back to the plan view, that's a much flatter space where folks could like kick a ball around or just hang out. Unprogrammed though, not like a formal athletic field. And then here's the park building. Sort of an interior performance space or gathering space, another like smaller open green space. Looking into the lobby there. Then stormwater capture would be integrated throughout there. And again, like different native plant communities as well to emphasize the habitat with a few of these more formalized corridors. This would be a plaza type space with lots of interesting seating elements, and then hopefully some kind of play water feature. Artful water feature. Larger gathering spaces. This is a picnic shelter proposed. There's a second picnic shelter on the other side of the building too. All right. So there is the fly through. Now I'm going to just go back up and kind of reorient you. So this was, we flew through coming in off of Sibley and 8th down that promenade to the water. There was some logs and rocks to climb on here, and also potentially could provide habitat for some of those reptile or you know, like more reptile type creatures, snakes and turtles. Then there's the river walk over to the gathering space near the here's that overlook looking over Halls Island. 5 here and 5 over here are the 2 picnic shelters, and 15 represents more we're thinking of it like habitat edges, because again it's a fragmented, you know, urban space. It's how do we kind of maximize the areas of the park that can provide a little bit quieter, less activated in terms of human space. So we thought kind of pushing that to the edge seems like it makes sense. And then again, preserving Halls Island. Another promenade coming back from the river, going to the river, really aligning with the geometry of the building there. Potential future building site for concessions or maybe another tenant to help activate the site. And like I mentioned, stormwater capture throughout. Down here, number 6 is we passed it in the fly through and I forgot to mention, but in the, you know, paddle share, we are one of the participants in the paddle share program where you can rent a kayak and paddle on the river. This also might be like a human-powered watercraft storage facility or some kind of lending library in terms of kayaks or canoes, so paddle boards. So that is, in essence, the preferred concept. I'm going to zoom down now and show you the building, and then I'll open it up for questions and comments. We're still finalizing budget, but of course, there are things on the site that I already mentioned 2 would be at a future phase. Likely the picnic shelters will be at a future phase too, but if we can fit them in, we hope to. Same thing goes with the overlook. The kayak building, the paddle share would be able to be implemented right away, but more of a kind of architecturally designed space for that would be down the road. So with the building, of course, you know, lots of different kind of design inspirations. The stacked lumber, that building facade is an ode to the lumberyard history, but it also provides benefits from a bird safe, kind of wildlife safe perspective, creating like a scrim over some of the windows. There definitely would be bird safe glass and other considerations in the design for making sure that having a building so close to the river, we're being respectful of wildlife. And then this is the building program. So entering in from either side of the building into the center lobby, there would be a park board staff at a desk. The interior space would be what we're calling the commons. Folks would come and set up shop and have use their laptop and do work or just hang out, be indoors during the winter. Just a flexible, unprogrammed, unreservable space for people to be. And then 4 represents a community space, a smaller meeting room that could be reserved. 2 is a larger community room, just flexible uses there. 3 is an indoor-outdoor space under a vestibule. And then there's some restrooms and storage. There's both the gender neutral and gendered restrooms. There's even a shower proposed. And then on the other side of the building here is what we're calling, in this image, it's called a creation space, but we're calling them Spark Studios now. It's a new maker technology space and program that the park board has been working on. So I think I'm just going to flash this image if you saw this already, but maybe I'll pause and I'm going to stop my sharing so I can see folks and just open it up for questions. I can bring the images back up or any other images that might be helpful. So any questions or comments, and thank you again for letting us come and share this with you.
I might not be able to see everybody that raises their hand, so let's just be, people can jump in, but not, please don't overspeak or over someone else. Does anyone have any questions? Carrie, are you looking for a motion of some sort in support?
It's always helpful to have, if there's interest in having like a group, a collective response to this, it's always helpful. Otherwise, this could just be an informal conversation with individual comments, and I'll take notes and share them with our design team as your input. So it's really, I think it's your call, and if you'd like to create a collective resolution.
Okay, and is this, just so I understand, is this the last time that this project will come before the PAC?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so we will be going to our board with the preferred concept, the next draft of the preferred concept, which is our final concept. And it'll stay at this level, like this schematic design level. And then, as I mentioned, there's intersection improvements and this underpass. And what we'd like to do as we move into construction and detailed design work, we'd love to come back and share intersection and underpass concepts with you. But in terms of the entire park and flow and kind of priorities of the park, this is the final sort of conversational time for feedback. There's always the public hearing. This is also a great time to come before our board and share more formal statements. So there is, officially there's another round of community engagement for the concept, and that's at our public hearing, which we hope will be towards the end of February, but might be ambitious.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Does anybody have any specific questions? If not, I have one. Nobody jumping in. So you talked about some features that you described today during the flyover specifically would be reserved for a later phase or later funding round. Is that something that's sort of on the books on when that can happen, or is it tentative or speculative at this point? For example, the picnic pavilions or whatever.
Yeah, great question. So we don't currently have anything in our 5-year CIP, so our capital improvement program, that is earmarking additional dollars for Graco Park. So in our, as far as we only forecast out 5 years of funding, but they're certainly on regular cycles. There's regional parks and trails funding that comes to each of the regional parks. And so this is in the Above the Falls Regional Park, and there'll be a funding allocation, in the next decade that would get parsed out to different regional parks. And so know that there would be additional funding at some point, and then there's always the chance of philanthropy. We hope that there might be some philanthropic partner for realizing some of this too. So no immediate plans, but yes, there would be additional funding down the road, similar to any of our master plans. We don't build them out right away. They're long-term master plans that typically will get implemented over the course of 20 years. So,
okay, thank you. Does anybody have any clarifying questions that they want to ask before we thank Carrie for her presentation and attendance tonight? Well, I don't think so. So Carrie, thank you very much. And if people have thoughts later, they'll send them to you or jump into the public forum that are coming up. So thank you very much.
Fabulous. Thank you all so much. Take care.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye. Up next is the Hennepin Avenue reconstruction at 30%. Who do we have here? I can't quite see everyone that's attending. Becca, Alan, Adam, Amy, who's here? Who's gonna lead this?
Hi, I'll start. We have a presentation to share. Becca Hughes with Transportation Planning and Programming, and yes, we're here with the full team this afternoon, evening. So we also have Jonette Kunow from Kimley Horn. We'll give a brief presentation and then address questions following that presentation.
Thank you. Take it away.
Great, thank you. So thanks again for having us. It's been some time since we visited with the PAC, but we're excited to return and share the recommended design layout for the Hennepin reconstruction. If you've participated in any of the previous engagement, whether that was the open house last week or any of the stakeholder meetings, this is sort of a condensed version of the presentation that's actually available on the public website. And if you attended some of those events, some of this will be a bit repetitive, but bear with us. We'll move through this as quickly as we can. So tonight we are looking to cover the recommended design, address some of the technical aspects of that design. We will address the project schedule and then conclude with questions. So as a recap,
could you let us know what level of comments would be helpful? Like how specific is too specific and what's still up for discussion?
Sure. Where we'd like you to focus is on detail-related items for the recommended design. I think it's important to note, however, that we are at 30%, so there are still some things, many detailed design elements that need to be advanced and explored after layout approval, so that's sort of 30 to 100%. If there are things that are glaring or questions that you have specifically about how we've come to this recommendation, we're happy to share that if it isn't gleaned out of the presentation that we're sharing. So hopefully we can kind of roll through this in the next 15 minutes. And again, it might be a repeat performance for several of you.
Thank you.
So again, this is a reconstruction project extending from Douglas Avenue on the north to Lake Street on the south. It's about a 1.3 mile segment. We have 3 neighborhood groups that are adjacent to the corridor, 2 special service districts, as well as a business association. This Hennepin Avenue corridor, of course, is also a boundary between wards 7 and 10 for our city council ward boundaries. We've had engagement first began for this project back in 2018 when we were looking to secure federal funds for the project. We were able to secure $7.5 million in federal funds to help offset the costs of the reconstruction effort. We are in the midst of engagement. This is our last round of engagement before we intend to bring our department recommended layout forward to the City Council for a vote. We've had several rounds of engagement since 2020 and thousands of comments throughout the entire spectrum on the project, and we'll get into a little bit of those themes later. So I won't spend too much time on the policy plans. I think pretty much everyone that's on this committee is very well acquainted with the policy plans or the foundation for the recommended design for this corridor and others throughout the city. But these are really our 7 guiding documents that are the foundation. And of course, we supplement that with technical analysis as well as public feedback to generate a recommended design for the corridor.
This is Jonette Kunow. I'm sorry, my camera seems to not be working, but I'm going to go over some of the design elements. So Becca and I will go through this section. So some of the key features of the recommended design, there is consistent sidewalk space along the street, along the length of the street. There is a 2-way sidewalk level bikeway on the east side of the corridor. That's shown in gray in this snip that's on the slide. There are 2 full-time dedicated transit lanes. Those are shown in red on this image. There are 2 vehicle lanes with left turn lanes at key intersections. There are additional vehicle lanes at the north end near Franklin Avenue and at the south end between 29th and Lake Street based on some of the traffic patterns in those areas. Parking and loading was accommodated in the design, both where it fit within the right-of-way and where we saw the most significant need as we looked at overall parking resources. We can talk more about that if you're interested in that. And then we really did try to preserve existing trees where that was feasible and certainly provide green space along the corridor. So the previous graphic was an overhead view of the layout. This is a view that's more looking down the street. So this would be looking towards the north. And a couple things I want to call out here. One is there is a median along the majority of the corridor, and that was a really key safety element that was incorporated into the design. And then you see the bikeway that's at sidewalk level on the east side. The typical section would have the boulevard space separating the bikeway from the sidewalk. You'll see in other sections, there are locations where the bikeway and the sidewalk need to be adjacent to each other for certain reasons. And then I'll just note here, we are proposing 10-foot lanes, which is consistent with the city street design guide. And then of course, where we have gutters at the median and on the outside, there's gutter space, which is important for stormwater. This section is an example at an intersection that does have a left turn lane. So this is a more constrained section. So the bikeway is reduced from 10 feet to 8 feet. The other thing I'll note on this section is that we are using a bend out or essentially a bend out bikeway design, which creates a buffer between the curb on Hennepin and the bikeway. And the purpose of that is to improve sight lines for drivers that are turning so that they're better able to see the person walking or biking as they get to the crosswalk. This section includes a transit station. We'll talk more about this, but Hennepin Avenue is part of the E-line arterial BRT, which is proposed. It's a 13-mile corridor. This section of Hennepin does have stations. We'll talk more about that. So you can see how the bikeway and the BRT station fit together. This is one of the more constrained areas that we have to fit in all the elements.
So I'll hop back in and talk a little bit about some of the design elements, specifically as it relates to pedestrian design in terms of existing conditions and context. I'm sure you're all familiar, but just to recap, it is certainly on the city's high injury network, where we do have an overrepresentation in terms of injury crashes. We have narrow sidewalks. As Jonette was mentioning, a driver for this project was having consistent sidewalk widths, and we do have narrow sidewalks in some of the blocks on the northern portion of the corridor. And then according to the Transportation Action Plan, of course, this is on the pedestrian priority network. And so in terms of the recommended design, we were able to reduce crossing distances on the corridor. Currently it's 60 feet curb to curb, which is essentially 30 feet on either side of the center line. We're able to reduce that to 10 feet in most locations and down to 6 still in locations where it's still constrained. In terms of the enhanced pedestrian crossings, on some of the longer blocks on the northern portion of the corridor, we were able to integrate these enhanced crossings that do include signalization, specifically at the Fremont Avenue intersection and 25th and a half Street. Curb extensions will be provided on all cross streets where that is feasible. On those intersecting streets, of course, that's not feasible on Hennepin Avenue. We do have the curbside transit running lanes. We do have medians integrated throughout the corridor, and this was very intentional to reduce conflicts at driveways, drivers looking to take a gap in traffic to make left turns and to cross several lanes of traffic. Again, that contributed to the reason why the city's on the high injury network, is just all of these different sort of mid-block approaches and left-hand turns that are happening throughout the corridor. So the medians will reduce that conflict. We were able to work with 7 property owners on curb cut closures and consolidations specific to locations where there were multiple access points to Hennepin Avenue. The consistent treatment in terms of width is 8-foot sidewalks, essentially from Lake to Franklin. Again, as Jonette mentioned, we do have some constrained locations where it will be reduced to 5.5 to 7 feet, and we do have 6-foot sidewalks as the standard north of Franklin Avenue. And so this is an example of an enhanced pedestrian crossing specific at Fremont. Again, as I noted, the other location is at 25th and a half Street. You can see that we are looking to concentrate the pedestrian crossings at this specific location into these two locations where there will be signalized crossings. And this is an example of protected intersection treatments. And so this is an example where you can see the bikeway and the bend out design coming to a head. You can see the intersection with the one-way bikeway on 26th Street, specifically where that cursor is moving at the right-hand corner of your screen. So we are accounting in our design for both 26th and 28th, where we currently have protected bike facilities, and how we can integrate protected intersection treatments into the design. In terms of bicycle design, of course, there is no existing facility on the corridor, also on the city's high injury network in terms of overrepresentation and injury crashes for cyclists. And it is on our all ages and abilities or our AAA bicycle network as identified in the Transportation Action Plan. As Jonette mentioned, we do have a sidewalk level to a bikeway facility on the east side of Hennepin Avenue. The width for the majority is 10 feet in width, which complies with our street design guide. It is 8 feet in width at some of the constrained locations. As noted, the design does account for the future protected bikeways, which you just saw in the last slide. I will say that I think we've brought the PAC and the BAC along with discussions that we've had regarding bicycle design. Initially it was our intent to have separated facilities, so facilities on each side of the corridor running with traffic, but at the sidewalk level. And as we started adding different elements into this plan, it became clear to us that every foot mattered, and there just wasn't adequate space to be able to accommodate separated facilities. So that is why we do have the two-way bikeway facility on the east side of the corridor. I think you're also aware that we did evaluate different bikeway options on parallel routes as alternatives to the corridor, as well as hybrid options. And of course, neither of those were designs that we advanced as part of this process. It was due diligence, but they didn't comply with our overall policies and goals for this corridor. And then in terms of transit design, you're probably also quite familiar that back in 2018 was when we deployed our first bus lane pilot on the corridor, and we implemented those more fully in 2019. We've worked with Metro Transit throughout this process to better understand the impact of these dynamic bus lanes that were integrated in 2019. And what we've seen is improvements in terms of travel time, so 15 to 18% in terms of reductions, and improvements to overall transit reliability from 50 to 75%. So we've seen good success, which is why we're looking to integrate them more fully as part of this reconstruction effort. We do further expect that ridership will continue to grow consistent with the gains that Metro Transit has seen on the A line and the C line, which in essence are in that 25 to 35% realm. We are coordinating closely with Metro Transit and have throughout this process on E-line stops and just integrating that overall facility into the corridor redesign. And we do know that based on extensive analysis that we've done, that many of the transit riders that are utilizing transit currently on the corridor do have destinations on or near Hennepin Avenue. So they are using it to get to businesses and to destinations along Hennepin Avenue. And of course, Hennepin Avenue is on the Transit Priority Network as part of the Transportation Action Plan. So ultimately, our recommended design, as Jonette mentioned, full-time 24/7 transit lanes that extend from Douglas Avenue on the north to the Uptown Transit Station on the south. We do have BRT stations specifically along the corridor, one utilizing the existing Uptown Transit Station, but then other locations specifically at 25th and Franklin. And what is a typical condition is that Metro Transit will be looking to reduce the overall number of local stops on the corridor as well, which is typically what happens when BRT service is integrated on these corridors. I will also mention that, one statistic that we've been sharing at all of these meetings is just, a check-in we recently had with Metro Transit, which basically stated that performance overall or ridership overall on BRT corridors has been at nearly 76% of the level of the pre-pandemic ridership levels on BRT corridors. So we continue to understand the data proves that the BRT corridors themselves are still carrying a high level of ridership even during the pandemic. So it's not just for getting commuters in and out of downtown or the reverse commute, it is for trips throughout the day.
The vehicle design for the corridor, where we started with that was the existing conditions, which has 2 vehicle lanes in each direction and no left turn lanes. Those 2 vehicle lanes in each direction don't actually operate very well. We see that frequently drivers are changing lanes to move around a bus that is pulling in and out of traffic. Drivers are also moving out of the left lane because of the number of locations where people are turning left into driveways. And we see that, sort of congested and uneven traffic flow reflected in both the safety as well as just the overall operations of the corridor. There are also restrictions at many of the signals where left turns are not allowed during peak times of the day. And as we've already mentioned, Hennepin Avenue is on the high injury network for all modes, and it is also on the city's freight network. So as we thought about the recommended design, there is 1 lane in each direction. And really what we're doing is separating out the different spaces. So transit is in a separate lane. It is reducing the number of lanes for cars. There are left turn lanes at key intersections, which is a benefit from both vehicle operations, but probably more importantly, safety perspective to have those left turn lanes, as well as median was a really key element. And then as noted, there are additional lanes at Franklin Avenue and near Lake Street where the traffic patterns are different than other locations in the corridor. And particularly on the north end, the traffic volumes are much higher in that segment than in other parts of the corridor. So Becca touched on this a little bit already, but we are at a 30% design. So there's a recommended design layout that will be brought forward as the recommendation for City Council approval. But there are a number of things that will need additional detailed design work through the remainder of the project. Those do include what happens in some of the green spaces, stormwater and sustainable stormwater and green infrastructure. Becca mentioned we will be evaluating raised pedestrian and bicycle crossings on all the crossings that are parallel to Hennepin Avenue, unsignalized parallel crossings, intersection corner radii and geometry, which is really important for reducing vehicle speeds. And then construction staging, we still will need to work through. In terms of schedule, we are in our 3rd round of engagement since 2020, so we're here in January of 2022, and anticipate that Public Works would bring a layout to Council in Q1 of this year. Then there is another year or so of final design through spring of 2023, and we anticipate construction would start in 2024. So with that, we will open it up to any questions, and we do have the full corridor layout if there are specific areas that anyone wants to look at or ask questions about.
Thank you for that. And again, I might not be able to see people who raise their hand. So if you want to jump in and be cognizant that there might be other questions. So keep the comments precise and the questions focused. So would anyone like to begin?
I can also help out with the hand raising stuff, Chris, if that's helpful. It looks like Julia's raising her hand. So Julia,
all right, well, Julia.
I've got a lot of questions. Of course, as always, I'm wondering, we're not seeing all crossings of all intersections. Specifically curious about that street at Jefferson that's functioning as a driveway, if it's been vacated or if it's still a street. And then Emerson and the north side of DuPont and the north side of Colfax all seem to be lacking their crossings. I love seeing that some of those are provided, but I'm concerned about the absence of some. Start with that.
And Jeanette, I don't know if you can share your screen again, but I can maybe just start in a response to that, is that you know, we anticipated that you would ask this question, or not necessarily you, but like the Pedestrian Advisory Committee would ask this question, and it was intentional for us to focus. We think that this outcome is actually safer in terms of focusing the pedestrian crossings into one location. So instead of having unsignalized, unenhanced crossings at all of these different locations, encouraging people to cross more effectively at the Fremont Avenue intersection was intentional. So, and then of course affiliated with the upgrades for signalization, we think this is going to be the safest and the best way for people to be able to cross the street.
Based on current use and how often people, I mean, right now we can legally cross at basically anywhere for most of the corridor, and people do very frequently. So I'm just concerned about making the street less porous by not having our legal crossings, which also I feel like they serve to communicate to drivers that this is a pedestrian space. This is a place where people are. Even if the other ones aren't signalized, having the cross through spaces so that people who use mobility devices and have balance issues can still take those legal crossings, I think is key to just like the rhetoric of the street for what drivers know to expect.
And you know, it is certainly a balance. As we looked at the street, I'm just showing DuPont here. So there is a crossing. The median was actually widened there so that it would be a refuge where someone could stop in the median. Elsewhere, the median is actually too narrow for somebody to stop there. So that one's at DuPont, at Colfax as well. There are pedestrian crossings. So the intent was to incorporate and have those crossings everywhere where there are those intersections. As Becca mentioned, at Fremont specifically, there were 4 potential places to cross. And as we evaluated that and looked at where did it make, we came to the conclusion it makes sense to make an investment to have an enhanced pedestrian crossing, and having other crossings that are nearby that are not enhanced really in some ways sort of reduce the benefit of that enhanced pedestrian crossing. And so that's why at that location, the crossings would be at Fremont and would be signalized.
I feel like the benefit is primarily for those who are not able to move as quickly, but I very rarely am crossing. I shouldn't say very rarely, probably about 2/3 of the time I'm crossing mid-block on Hennepin because of how light timing works, and because the angles mean that the turn movements are more dangerous. So having those crossings is really critical, even with how hostile the street is now. And I don't know exactly how this affects other parts of the street, because right now it is dependent on the timing, but I just am concerned to watch, to see us not having the same leeway to be able to cross the street as we need to, and especially to not see it at the legal crossings, the T intersections. I'll be quiet now, thank you.
Matthew, do you see anybody else with their hand raised?
Chris, are you able to monitor that? I think.
Yeah, it looks like Julia, yours went down and then went back up. Did you have something else?
Oh yeah, yes, but I want to give other people a chance, so that's why it went down and then back up.
I appreciate that, Julia, and yeah, if some people think of something, just be sure to raise your hand, and Chris or Matthew will see it. And Julia, if you have another comment or question, please proceed.
Yeah, I'm wanting to make sure when we're looking at the street widths, do they include the gutter, and will you be going for the 18-inch gutter?
Yeah, as we mentioned in the presentation, or Jonette mentioned, in the cross sections, they do include the gutter. So that's why they show 11-foot lanes, for example, 12-foot lanes. We're accounting for the median gutters as well as the curbside gutters. So we have them at the minimum and completely compliant with the street design guide.
I know we've been able to use 18-inch gutters in some circumstances, and this seems like a place where every foot matters. So if it's possible to get the 18-inch gutters here, I would really like to see that. I'm also wondering about specific intersections and treatments. Overall, the medians are not drawn through the crosswalks, and that's something that on the PAC we generally like to see because it helps tighten those turn radii for drivers, especially at particularly dangerous intersections. And I'm also seeing that it might provide a benefit for reducing the illegal left turns at a bunch of the intersections and sometimes just on the north side. Is that something that can be done?
And I would say, so on the screen is an example of that, you know, in terms of where exactly that median nose and whether it can extend into the crosswalk, is certainly we'll be evaluating further as we get into design and look at what some of the vehicle movements are and how we need to maintain that 4-foot median space right at the nose of the median. So whether those could potentially be closer to the crosswalk, I think that's something we'll have to continue to evaluate.
Awesome. It looks like 25th is one of the few where it doesn't seem like, I see where you probably wouldn't be extending them, but, or no, 25th is one where you would because it is the no left turns. I'm really glad to see the radii tightened up at Lake and Lagoon. And some of that curb work happening on the south side of the street where we weren't able to do it during the last South Hennepin project. And is it possible to do Lake and Lagoon as fully raised intersections to kind of highlight that dense pedestrian core hierarchy?
I think similar to probably Jonette's last response, you know, it's certainly something that we can evaluate as part of our final design or as we move beyond layout approval, but it's typically not something that we would show on a 30% layout, especially at a signalized intersection.
Okay, thank you.
May I just ask, just for my clarity, do you come back to the PAC? You know, sometimes 30% is the last time we see something. Is there something that you will return with, or do you not anticipate doing that?
I think unless there is some major change that's not specifically detail related, you know, we'll stay consistent with how past projects have interacted with the PAC. So it is our intention that this is probably the last time that we would visit with you. I think if there are key questions that we have, whether it's some of the items that Julia has just raised within this meeting, it's possible that we could return, but I think our intent is to maintain our interactions as we would on a typical project. But with that being said, this is complicated, it's high profile. So I suppose there's always the possibility, but right now we're intending to move forward with layout approval as is and kind of work through the detailed design related elements as we typically do.
And this is, I know, repetition because you stated it, but I didn't get it down. When do you anticipate bringing this to the council?
What we've been sharing publicly the last 3 weeks with the various engagement meetings that we've had is that our intention is to advance this in late Q1 of this year. We're still working towards that. I think one important thing to note here as well is that we do have all of the information that we shared, including the extended version of the presentation available on the public website. So there's cross sections and summaries and FAQs and the full layout for the corridor. And we do have an open comment form that is open until next Friday, the 28th. So we will close public comment next Friday. And then it's kind of a matter of sorting through all of the public feedback that we've received, which at this point seems very consistent with what, frankly, we've received in the last 2 rounds of engagement. So I guess just to put a finer point on it, our intent is late Q1. There's probably a little wiggle room in there as well, just as we're adjusting to changing city structures and changing ways in terms of how we potentially get things through the layout approval. But right now we're planning on PWI, our Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, as well as City Council for layout approval.
Thank you. The third question asked by me is, So my name is I can't see who's from disappears from Julia. Matthew, Chris, is there any other hands up besides Julia at this time?
I'll make sure we get them in.
Did other people hear that? Or was
I was just gonna say, yeah, Christopher, something changed with the voice. It was really like mumbled. I don't even know how to describe it. It was like Batman or something.
It sounded like one of those movies where they're using one of those fake voices so they don't get identified. You know.
I
Anyway,
will leave. I will leave and
Now
come
we
back.
can
You're back now. It's working.
Super
Okay.
clear now. Super clear now.
No, I just I see a hand, but I can't see who it's with on my small screen.
It's Julia.
It's Julia, absolutely. Is there anyone else? And then Julia, why don't you pick your priority concerns or comments, and then go with those, and then we'll
Yes.
talk
I have
about.
done so.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I realized it's helpful to hear other people's the comments and the scope and everything. So I think that the two things that I would raise, and these are not, I don't need a specific response, but looking at 24 and 26, I do have some concerns still that the problems that exist now won't be fully absent, specifically the wide lefts off of the side streets onto Hennepin have been really scary. And it looks like it's narrow crossings, but still really similar movements. And then there's a northbound kind of skewing over. So if somebody's like going northbound and then like going past Temple Israel northbound in a car, I've seen that taken in some really odd ways that are also dangerous for pedestrians. So just as a, maybe, I don't know how all that works, but a request from this pedestrian to please just be super aware of those, because I've had a couple very, very, very close misses that have been terrifying at both of those. And now I have nightmares about it. And then my other comment would just be north of Franklin. I know that we're going to see people continuing to bike that stretch because it's such a short stretch. There's Nice Ride, there's the Walker, there's a whole bunch of reasons to not take the Bryant path. So whatever you can do to get that sidewalk a bit wider, knowing that we'll be sharing it with people biking, would be great, especially given the lack of crossings. Having people biking there helps it feel safe. We lack anything on the east side of the street, so walking it late at night or during low pedestrian times of day, knowing there's also people biking, really improves the sense of safety. So making it feel welcoming, even if it isn't technically a bikeway, would be great. And I am going to mute myself and thank you. And also just, I realize I'm asking the very specific questions, but I'm so glad to see what we're seeing. And I really, really, really appreciate all this work, and the fact that I can get my questions down to an allowable amount is for this meeting is, I think, reflects how well the design process has gone so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. With your comments about as things stand now, barring a huge issue, this will be the last time the PAC. So I anticipate that now is the time for us to draft a motion and supporting this direction that you're going, and with whatever concerns or comments or additional support that we do. So we will do that. Is there anyone else on the team that needs to make a comment or would like us to consider something, or is there anything else that you'd like to share? I know you've done this a million times, I think, over the last few months, present this, so I appreciate it once again. So anything else from the team? What's that, Matthew?
Yeah, I have a question. What's the plan for the resolution? I think that's fairly important. Will there be a small team that drafts it?
I think what we'll do is it's contingent. If we get through the agenda with a few minutes left, I'd like to get some bullet points down on that and then circulate it amongst the co-chairs and a couple of people who want to be included on that. And then we'll do it that way, because I don't think we're going to wordsmith during this meeting beyond just getting a couple of bullet points down and the general tone and that kind of thing. So if that answers. Yeah.
If I might interject, we also have it on the P&P agenda for Monday because we figured it would be an important resolution for this group. So I know we don't usually do that, but we do have some time for the group to be able to kind of workshop a resolution at that meeting.
Okay, that's
a good
good.
call. Nice.
I still would like to, if we have a few minutes to spare, get a few bullet points from this subcommittee in case there's not exact attendance similarities with the P&P next week. So, well, great. Without all that being said, thank you for the presentation, and we will get a motion to you.
Great, thank you so much. We appreciate your support, and we also appreciate all the detailed comments as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The last item on our agenda is the Cedar Isles Park Master Plan concepts. Emma, are you here?
I am here.
Excellent. Well, if you could be so kind to take it away.
Yep, absolutely. I'm just going to share my screen. One sec. All right, well, hi everyone. I think most of you know me, but I'm Emma Pachuta. I'm the project manager for the Cedar Lake of the Isles Master Plan that's currently going on at through the Minneapolis Park Board. I came and presented on this pretty early on. I think it may have been actually pre-COVID in 2019. Our engagement process was extended. So we're actually really early on in the design process still in 2022. So just wanted to give a quick snapshot of the area that we're master planning. It includes the Cedar Lake and the surrounding parkland, Lake of the Isles and the surrounding parkland, the Kenilworth Channel that connects both lakes, Dean Parkway, which is south of the Kenilworth Channel, and then a portion of the Cedar Lake Regional Trail to the west of Cedar Lake. So as I mentioned, we're kind of early on in the iterative design process that we go through with our master plans. We anticipate that we'll be taking feedback and changing this design through summer of 2022. So I'll just give an overview of the guiding principles, and then I will walk through. Right now we have two initial park concepts, and I'll do that really quickly and then just save it to gather any feedback and questions that you all have. So our draft guiding principles that will also evolve with the project include protect, invite, connect, tell stories, celebrate, and respect. And so these 6 guiding principles are really what we're trying to hold in our design concepts. And these were built off of all of the engagement that we've compiled to date. So as I mentioned, there are 2 concepts. The first one is concept A, or what we call the Living Lakes concept. This one really prioritizes water quality mitigation strategies as well as climate change mitigation strategies. So a lot of the lakes have been proposed to be naturalized. So having a lot of different types of restoration, including prairie along the Cedar Lake Regional Trail, some different restoration for oak savanna and mesic oak forest around Cedar Lake. Something else that we have proposed is the expansion of what's called the Littoral Edge. It's this light blue kind of line around the shorelines. This is an area that was kind of cut out when we developed the park system. And so it would be kind of proposing to bring back this sort of wetland area around the lakes. And that's a natural cleaning strategy for the lakes. So Lake of the Isles, there's kind of some big ideas proposed in this plan, which includes proposing naturalization or restoration around a lot of Lake of the Isles, and then kind of cutting out some pockets of grass areas or lawns for gathering spaces. And then these pink circles identify where we're proposing potentially new amenities. So a lot of the circles are things like a picnic pavilion or a lake deck, kind of these more formalizing these spaces for gathering. And then there's kind of a few different nodes that have been identified in this plan. The first one is adding some additional amenities at East Cedar Beach, including something like an outdoor classroom, a bathroom, and a canoe rental location. And then for Lake of the Isles, we've proposed adding an outdoor classroom where number 4 is located up in this northern arm. thinking about how it's close to the rec center and the school. And then at number 6, where the temporary warming house is with the skating rink, we've actually proposed consideration of a permanent ice skating rink, which could include something like a bathroom as well. Again, just some precedent images of the types of like sort of materials and infrastructure we're thinking. We really envision it sort of blending in with the environment, keeping some of these types of structures kind of like semi-impermanent to kind of fit in with the surroundings. Looking at concept B, which is called Unique Lake Experiences, this one really aims to honor kind of the existing feel of both lakes. So while we've proposed really similar restoration around Cedar Lake, we've proposed kind of retaining a lot of the lawn around Lake of the Isles. We've also reduced kind of the formalized gathering areas in this one. So we've proposed really similar amenities at East Cedar Beach in this one, but at Lake of the Isles, we've actually proposed consideration of moving the warming house over to this location, really thinking about with this new light rail station, really helping to welcome visitors, not just to Cedar Lake and East Cedar Beach, but then also thinking of ways to kind of welcoming them over to Lake of the Isles as well. And then just looking at some of the winter proposals. So for concept A, we've proposed keeping the same cross-country ski trails, the same ice skating rink. Again, that idea of potentially consideration of a permanent warming house at this location. We have proposed a new skating loop around the northern arm of Lake of the Isles, and then also proposed consideration of an ice skating rink at Cedar Lake. For concept B, the big thing here is just, again, we've proposed consideration of moving that warming house and ice skating rink over to the northwestern arm. And again, we've proposed a permanent warming house at that location. Looking at some of the ideas around circulation. So for concept A, we've kind of proposed some really minimal considerations around Cedar Lake. So there are a lot of natural kind of cow path sort of style paths throughout the forest. We've proposed formalizing a pedestrian connection from East Cedar Beach north up to the Cedar Lake Regional Trail. Again, thinking about some of this new traffic that might be coming from the light rail station. We've also proposed consideration of a one-way for a portion of Cedar Lake Parkway. This is really thinking about there's this kind of massive choke point for walking and biking at this location. So it would give us some more space to provide adequate space for all nodes. And then also we've heard a lot of feedback about people wanting to slow down traffic on the parkways, reduce traffic, close the parkways. So this was one way that we were thinking of how we could reduce some of that traffic along the area, but still create kind of connections or kind of keep vehicle access open, since this is a connection that comes from the highway I-94 north of here. Something else, we've proposed a pedestrian bike connection between Lake of the Isles and Burnham Road. This is proposed on both concepts. We've also proposed a new Midtown Greenway connection near the fields at Lake of the Isles. This is also shown on both concepts. In this concept around Lake of the Isles, we've proposed consideration of a one-way on-street painted bike lane. We've heard that people are really concerned with adding more pavement to this area. So that was one way that we thought we could add additional bike connection or bike circulation without really changing the amount of pavement needed. We've also proposed consideration of actually closing off this northern arm of Lake of the Isles to cars. So the idea here is that there's sort of these two parallel connections with Franklin Avenue and the Parkway. So it would actually create an easier connection to get over to Kenwood Park. You're only crossing one street instead of two. There's also a lot of like habitat or wildlife crossings in this area, kind of coming from this forested area up here. And so there is an opportunity to kind of rethink this parkland and give that back to either programming or lawn space or even habitat. And then looking at circulation for concept B, we did not propose any permanent closures on this one, but we did propose consideration of some temporary parkway closures, thinking similarly to what we did during COVID-19, where we closed down the streets, had those open to walking and biking. for different times of the year. So, you know, that these could be open, these could happen on Sunday, it could be open on the summer, kind of whatever the community is sort of open to. And then another thing that we've received a lot of feedback on is this idea of circulating, I don't know what the word is, getting around Cedar Lake fully. So we've proposed a pedestrian connection around the entirety of Cedar Lake, with this portion on the southeastern shore being a boardwalk connection. And then in this proposal, we've also proposed a two-way off-street bike path instead of an on-street bike connection. So I think those were kind of the big ideas. I wanted to make sure I created some space for questions. So I'll just pause here and see if anyone has either any clarifying questions or any feedback that you'd like to share.
If I could just ask for my notes purposes, would you repeat?
Christopher, you got the robot voice.
Hey, you got the robot voice again.
Sorry about that.
Now it's back. Now you're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you just, for my notes, could you just restate? I know your outreach was extended, but generally, what would you just briefly go through the schedule again?
Sure. Let me just kind of go back to do you mean like the schedule for engagement, Christopher, or more like what's coming up?
Yeah. Okay. So it's okay. So you're looking to by Q4 2022 have it finalized. Is that, and then start construction in 2023?
Well, so yes, that is the tentative goal, is to have this brought to our board of directors or board of commissioners to hopefully adopt and vote on this final plan by the end of this year. We don't have any funding. Actually, my cat might attack me any second, so I'll step away if he does. We don't have any funding to actually start implementation at this time. However, once the master plan is adopted, what that means is that it does open up future regional park funding through the Met Council. And it also allows us to be able to apply for grants and find future funding for some of these ideas, but nothing's actually lined up and sort of ready to go at this point.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, but generally those types of funding requests and that kind of thing, is it like a 5-year process, a 10-year process? Do you have any idea once the design is finalized?
Well, the master plan that we're creating and building out is meant to be a 20 to 30 year vision. So, you know, there we go. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I swear he always knows when I'm presenting. So it's a 20 to 30 year vision. And so, you know, once the plan is adopted, you know, staff can take a little bit of a deeper dive and look at funding opportunities. But right now, the idea is that, you know, we're building this plan out and we've got 20 to 30 years to implement it.
Thank you.
Julia, I do see your hand up now. Do you have a question or comment in light of you're looking 30 years into the future, apparently, but please ask your question.
Yes, and your voice has me feeling like we're looking 30 years into the future too. There's a lot that I'm seeing that I am appreciating, like the whole Cedar Lake path, the prioritizing crossings for creatures and humans over carways, the Midtown Greenway connection especially. I'm a little curious, as climate breakdown intensifies and kind of depending on whether we go the path of decreased fossil fuel dependency or if we exacerbate the problem continuing, how will this plan be able to be updated in light of rapidly changing context? And are there ways of prioritizing parts of the plan that are critical for reducing emissions, like prioritizing two-way bike lanes and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, That's a really good question. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to totally answer it. I will say that, we believe that these plans are really trying to think about climate change, and, this idea of naturalizing and sort of restoration work is a big part of that. One thing that we do in our master plans is that we do try to kind of have a list of what pieces of these items we want to prioritize first. So that would be something that would be in the plan. Ideally would be kind of identifying like which issues do we want to focus on and do we care about most and do we want to make sure we have funding for first. And I will say that one of the biggest topics that we're hearing that people care about the most right now is protect. So that protection of natural areas, water quality strategies is kind of the number one thing that people are asking us to focus on in this plan. And then the second out of those 6 guiding principles that people are kind of that's raising to another top priority is circulation and that connection. So, I mean, I'm making an assumption here, but I would assume that some of the top priorities would be around circulation and natural areas and like water quality mitigation strategies which that would be kind of start implementing first.
Okay, I mean, it seems like there'd be ways of considering the emissions reductions that could happen or by building out our bike network, by having like that Midtown Greenway connection has the potential to really reduce how deserted that portion of the Greenway can feel, and maybe shift, somebody who might not have felt safe or is now has more options. There's things like that, or having clear connections for biking 26 and what happens when you get spit out onto Hennepin, where if that can be brought together with the project we just saw. I appreciate that thinking. I just am wondering how we can support the things that need to happen to reduce emissions within this plan.
That's a great question, Julie. I might need to kind of, noodle on that a little bit. And I'll note that, something that has actually there's a tension when we have park board conversations with community is the role of the bike and pedestrian network in the park system. Some feel very strongly it should be for recreation only, and then others feel like it needs to be for commuting as well. And part of it might be circumstantial. Like, for example, Cedar Lake Parkway is the commuter route for both cars and bikes. And so it is a two-way bikeway intentionally. So for that reason, but it is, your point is noted. And I'll just note that it's an ongoing conversation that we're having with our advisory committee.
And just one last note is the connections, the east-west connections across the chain of lakes are basically Franklin. You have a lit sidewalk that gets cleared, I think, and then you don't have anything till basically south of Bade-Makaska. So I understand the concerns about recreation, but we've put in so many lanes of vehicle traffic independent of our parkways, and we have not done the same thing for walking and biking. So, and we do seem to still prioritize using our parks as thoroughfares for cars, where we're not providing that ability to do that for people outside of cars, even with the benefits. Is there any chance of getting transit on these? I don't think you mentioned that.
Is there any chance in getting, I'm sorry, what was the question?
Like transit. I know we've got one of the few grandfathered in sections where the 25 runs on aisles, but is there any other plans for, my understanding is that transit is prohibited because of the same sort of thinking that.
Oh, transit on the parkway, you mean? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know there are a few BRT stops that are coming up here. I think I forget, is it the D line that's coming near, that's going to be stopping up here? To be quite honest, I'd have to double check if that policy still exists or if that changed under our last commissioners. Off the top of my head, I don't remember if we do or do not allow transit on the parkway at this time, but I can definitely check for that and get that answer.
Thank you.
How is my voice now?
Normal.
Oh, well, I better talk quickly. Understanding without having any money, it's a little speculative, but this is the design process, and is it fair to say that you would like a motion at this time, a preference between concept A, concept B, and some details? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. You know, I would say that we don't anticipate selecting a concept. We actually believe we're going to probably pick some aspects of concept A and some from concept B, and there'll probably be some sort of a hybrid in our preferred concept that comes out later this year. So if the Pedestrian Advisory Committee wanted to make any sort of recommendation, I think it'd actually be very helpful to understand, are there proposed elements in either plan that you see as assets? And maybe identify those for me. You could send a formal letter if you'd like, and I can make sure our advisory committee views that. You can also just send me an email and I'll make sure that those comments are incorporated.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no hands or hearing any voices, I want to thank you for your presentation, and I think it will, our children or grandchildren will fully embrace whatever's decided. So.
Well, thanks everyone for having me, and I hope you'll have me come back and allow me to share kind of an update later this year, so I can get your feedback. So,
we look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to try to turn on my calendar here, see if I have enough bandwidth not to go robot again. But we have just a couple minutes. I understand that, you know, as you, Chris and Matthew both mentioned that P&P will be talking about Hennepin and have some time to sort of wordsmith. But I just want to see if there's anybody here who might not be at the P&P that has a comment about it. You know, I'm just for me, just thinking that, you know, I think it's important to stress our support of this plan and the big picture elements of it, the reduction in parking, the enhanced intersections, that kind of thing. I think we want to be very clear on our support and not detail it into negativity, you know, sort of picky unit into negativity, but still then after big picture support, say what we like, and then say, you know, we could, I think, clearly, you know, include some things that we would want additional consideration of, or push a couple of details. I'll be quiet after that because that can be embraced in the P&P, and I'll be at the P&P next week. So with that being said, does anybody else in attendance now have a strong feeling on how a motion, which will probably be obviously a combined motion, a full pack motion, what it should address? Is there anything that we haven't talked about, or anything that should be said or not said? All right, well, we'll leave that to P&P.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
Christopher, I have thoughts.
Excellent.
I agree with how you framed it, and I think, you know, I'll just you know, in my agreement about how you framed it, I'll just highlight that like this is a positional issue at this point. There's people that are against it, and there's people that are for it. And I think the message that the PAC is in support of the design is very important, to be very clear about that. I think some basic statements about how it is the only option that aligns with the city's policies is important. And then also, I think something that we shouldn't lose is to note that there has been a tremendous amount of support voiced throughout the process, which is how the design was landed on, because I think that's a big part of it. And those would be some of the points that I think would be helpful. So PAC supports it, it meets the policy, and there's significant support out there, and whatever way you can say that and quantify it would be helpful.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, well, we'll bring those thoughts and comments, and I'll do a little noodling and drafting before the P&P, but we'll have time to do that then. I was a little unclear before the Cedar Isles. You know, that's a very long distance looking into the future. But I think we can think about what. There's no time. There's still going to be a number of months of public input, so we can talk about maybe be a little email back and forth what we want to support out of each plan. There's a few different things. I think generally, just speaking for myself, sort of a reversion to a more native or natural habitat. I think is the general fork in the road that should be pursued. But obviously, there's a ton of details we just saw. So, with the time being about, what is it there, 6 o'clock? Is that really what it is? Yeah, 6 o'clock. My goodness. Is there any other comments or questions from anyone else? Otherwise, we'll wrap this up and everyone can go get some dinner or whatever they're going to do.
Just a reminder to anybody else who maybe was looking at specific details of the Hennepin Avenue project. I believe there's a survey up. I don't remember if there's an interactive map, but they're taking comments through January 28th on that. And I know I have a couple of comments that weren't right for this meeting that I'll be sending on in that way. So just encouraging others to consider that as well for other level questions or comments for them.
Thank you, Julia. And Julia, I saw your email and I'm working on that. So by the way.
Oh, great.
Anyone else? Seeing no hands or hearing no voices, it's 6 o'clock. Thank you, everyone. This was a long meeting, but a lot of ground to cover. No pun intended. So, everyone, good night, and I'll work on my computer so I'm not a robot anymore. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a good